Thank you very much, especially Dimitrios, for having arranged that. Dimitrios is a long-time ally of the International Institute for Peace, or we are your allies, so we are on equal terms.
Mutual.
And, we are very happy to have that discussion. Just to inform you, the International Institute for Peace is a non-partisan, non-party organization in Vienna, and we try to point or to bring the attention to some of the crisis areas, of course, especially in the neighborhood of Europe, but also beyond, because our strong conviction is that peace is possible, even if it's a region like yours, where we have conflicts for quite a long time. Now, I welcome all the listeners and viewers and those who attend us, and I may just, in the order I was given, present our colleague. So we have Mustafa Aydin, he's president of International Relations Council of Turkey, and he's also professor at Kadir University. Thank you for joining us. We have Dimitrios Triantafyllou, he is director of the Center for International European Studies, Kadir University. He's a organizer of that event now. We have Koukkides-Procopiou. She is a senior fellow from Cyprus Center for Europe and International Affairs at the University of Nicosia. And we have Ahmet Sözen, chair of the Department for Political Science and International Relations, Eastern Mediterranean University. If I'm correct, hopefully I'm correct. I'm very glad we can speak about the subject, which is making sense of developments in the Eastern Mediterranean. So I don't know if we can make sense of it. I hope we can make sense of it. The basic idea is that we try to get some glimpse, some description, definition of the crisis we have at present in the Eastern Mediterranean, but then also think about what is the wider aspect, because this area is has been for a long time some sort of a theater of conflicts and controversies. So this is the basic idea. And then, of course, look into the future. Is a future with peace or understanding or compromise possible or not? So maybe I'm very open for the direction of where we should go. Maybe, Dimitrios, you start, and then we go to Koukkides-Procopiou. I asked Dimitrios because he is some sort of a hybrid situation, in a hybrid situation. Not you are hybrid, but the situation is hybrid. Somebody coming from Greece, teaching in Istanbul, you have a bit of a wider view and you know the different sides. And then Anna, not only because she is a woman, but I think she's coming from the center of some of the conflicts, from teaching at least in a smaller country, an island which is still a separation line, a dividing line through the island. And I've just read, I think it was today, that President Erdogan proposed maybe to think about a two-state solution. So we forget the two-state solution in Israel, but come now to a two-state solution in Cyprus or not, but it's just, anyway, some subjects we should deal with. And then maybe Mustafa Aydin and Ahmet Sözen. I would propose about 5, 6, maximum 7 minutes introduction. What is your orientation? And then go for some, reaction to each other and some questions which should come in. We have about more than 50 participants already, so there is an interest, and of course we put it on the website, and everybody can see it afterwards as well. Dimitrios, please.
Well, Hannes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction, and I'd like to welcome also my co-panelists on this interesting session. Yeah, you're putting me on the spot now, trying to talk about 7 minutes about what is happening. I mean, what is happening is interesting. We just had an announcement a few days ago that Pfizer is about to market the shot, the pandemic shot, to save us, right? And the news in Greece was incredible news. Albert Bourlas, the CEO of Pfizer, is Greek. He's a Greek Jew. And it's the only thing that's played in Greece. Oh my goodness, the Greek is out there. And the news in Turkey is that Uğur Şahin and Özlem Türeci, co-founders of BioNTech, which is a German company, are Turkish immigrants that have moved and made a life and a name for themselves. And no one talks about the other, right? So you have a Greek-Turkish dimension. I mean, now people have started talking about it. At the beginning, it was the big news in Greece about the Greek saving the world, and in Turkey was about the Turks saving the world. And we forget about the other dimension. And here we have a very nice example of Greek-Turkish cooperation, even though I'm sure they were not thinking of that when they were trying to develop the vaccine and trying to market it, right? And this is the state of where we are. Parallel discourses. Parallel discourses that have been sort of prolonged, especially this year, because we find ourselves in a year. Here we are. We are mid-November. The year is almost over. In high tension for over a year right now. For over a year, and characteristically, because of the pandemic, also high tension, in particular between Greece and Turkey, over the summer months, where usually tensions tend to go down because of tourism. And likewise in Cyprus, right? We all want the revenues of Austrians such as yourself and Germans and everybody else from the world to leave their euros or dollars in our countries. And so there's some sort of moratorium in place. But this year, because of the pandemic and lack of tourism, that moratorium is not has not occurred. And so what we have is high tensions, the militarization of foreign policy to some extent, increased threat perceptions and lack of trust, which were already there. We're already there between Greeks and Turks, and our Cypriot colleagues will talk about Cyprus in that sense as well. And a realization that something has to give somewhere. That these parallel discourses, which might be justified on all sides. One should and assume that policymakers, whether in Athens or in Ankara or in Nicosia or Lefkosa, they know they're thinking rationally about their interests, even though each policymaker has a different status in the international arena, but they're thinking rationally about their interests and the interests of their communities, of their citizens, and so on. But nevertheless, even this rationalization has been leading to increased tensions at the time of what I would call systemic change, where you have the emergence of the multilateral order sort of disintegrating. We are living through it, and you have the rise of a multipolar order with competing poles, whereby regional countries like Turkey and others, I know you had sent us a list of questions, Israel or others, Egypt in our part of the world, are trying to be poles in this multipolar world order. But even poles within the existing multilateral order, if you think about the United States, Russia, China, as permanent members of the Security Council that have benefited from the multilateral order that's been in place since the Second World War, they're also acting in terms of great power competition, so a greater multipolar world. And part of that is reflected, I think, in our part of the world, where given the fact that there's systemic change, given the fact that the one guarantor that's still the guarantor, but is ambivalent about its power or its ability or its willingness to be the guarantor of stability and peace in the region, the United States, we are not very sure what it wants to do. And this is not something, this has been reflected very clearly during the Trump era, but it's something that started beforehand. And it's something that we are now all debating in international capitals as to what a Biden America actually means for us. And we shall see whether it means significant change, because as you've had this emergence of great power competition, it also means that powers, whether they are great or smaller powers, are leveraging for attention, leveraging for more power in whatever world, if there's a sense of a return of normalcy with Biden. And so in this context, the Greek-Turkish tensions have historical antecedents. They are not new. One can say and bring in the dimension of oil and gas exploration in the Aegean. Absolutely, that's part of the, but there are historical antecedents there. And because the histories of the two countries has been forged, one has been forged by the other to a great extent. To a great extent, national holidays in Turkey reflect victories over Greeks. Next year, Greece will be celebrating the 200th year since its independence in 1821, and ceremonies are being planned. And I do not want to think about the content of some of the ceremonies, but how these will be reflected or visualized. Not that I want the Greeks should care; they are celebrating their history, but how they would be interpreted by the other side. And what you've had in this long period of a cold peace between Greece and Turkey for the 20th century, much of the 20th century and the first 2 decades of the 21st century, it also means that we've never really sat down to resolve outstanding issues that have to deal in particular with sovereign rights, with continental shelves, exclusive economic zones, and issues that have to deal with delimitation, where in that sense, or even Greece's sovereign right to extend its territorial waters in the Aegean, contested airspace, and so on and so forth. So these issues have not really been resolved because there was a big brother, the United States there was a Cold War context, and the post-Cold War context which somehow kept things at bay. But now with the discoveries of hydrocarbons, which that in itself is another discussion as to whether they're valuable anymore. I mean, we might be fighting for issues that have no relevance anymore, given the cost of their exploitation and whatever. But nevertheless, it's a reality until we come to a new sort of energy needs for our world. All these issues have come to the fore again because of competition as to under whose territorial waters or whose continental shelf or whose exclusive economic zones these belong. And in a way, this is what has been happening. It's interesting. This latest phase of the conflict basically started a year ago with the Turkey-Libya memoranda, but the one about delimitation in particular, which has spurred on Greece to try to address this issue as a small country, and Cyprus also as a small country. How do they deal with it? They deal with it in terms of their membership in international organizations or fora such as the European Union, which is one of the things we always forget is principally made of small or very small countries. These are the members, such as your country, Hannes, and my country, and Cyprus even more so. And so, you want to ensure that your security and stability is ensured by belonging in this fora, either be it NATO if possible, or through international law and its application, right? And therefore, Greece has tried to strengthen its legal positions by signing delimitation agreements, for example, with Italy in the Ionian Sea. That has nothing to do with Turkey per se, but it's sending a message that it wants to compromise, because that's what a delimitation agreement is, a bilateral agreement. It's a product of compromise. One looks at the provisions of what the law of the sea convention gives a country, and then on that basis compromises with its neighbor. And then a partial delimitation agreement with Egypt. Again, I think sending a message to Ankara, there are ways of dealing with some of the issues that are out there and outstanding, while Greece has been met with Ankara's strong arm tactics, and as I said, the militarization of the conflict, which means sending vessels to explore, or even in the case of Cyprus, to actually drill for oil, accompanied by warships, and Greece has to react. And so I know I'm running out of time, right? That's what you're trying to tell me. So, I mean, I'm not going to go, maybe in the questions and answers, we'll talk more, and maybe my colleagues will talk more, but this is the general setting. And which means that it's been very difficult to get to the table. So from a Greek perspective, what you have is a side says that, I have to use the instruments at hand and also the support of my allies, which is why I belong to the EU, not only their solidarity, but their clear stated solidarity that what's at stake are sovereignty, sovereign rights, and therefore these have to be respected and protected. On the other hand, Ankara, with which the EU is trying to find a modus vivendi, and I always say one should look a little bit at the Council conclusions of October, European Council conclusions of October, which is very clear as to what they use, how they use trying to deal with the situation, which is calling, accepting the Greek and Cypriot positions, also saying that Greece and Turkey should sit down to begin the proximity talks to deal with issues of continental shelf and exclusive economic zones, and also presenting a positive agenda, because this is part of a wider relationship with Turkey, and that has not seemed to have worked, even though we all know very well that to get to these council conclusions, obviously Germany and other powers had spoken to Turkey, had gotten Turkey's support for this kind of conclusions, in that we would move on to another phase. But we have not been able to move on to another phase. And this has sort of, complicated tensions and the uncertainty which, has been extended, but also the uncertainty which is a very visual uncertainty, as shown by the visit yesterday of the Turkish president in Cyprus, and his very, very public visit in a particular place. And so this is where we are, lack of trust, lack of dialogue, and I would posit also, interestingly enough, again, COVID has really destroyed us, in the sense that it has had an impact on lack of dialogue between societies when you cannot travel to the other side. I mean, the interaction, it's happened in Cyprus too, where the crossings have closed because of COVID, but it's happened between Greece and Turkey as well. It's a 1-hour flight away. I cannot fly to my country. There's only one land border crossing. The shipping, joining Aegean cities, Turkish cities with Greek islands, that has all stopped, where you had day tourists and so on come in. And so even societies do not get to talk to each other, except maybe through the wonders of Zoom and other applications such as these, but it's not enough. And so even COVID has also deterred us from advancing, and actually it means that citizens are basically get their opinions or not from their direct interaction, but from what their governments want to put out there. So maybe I'll stop here. Yeah.
Thank you, Dimitrios. Thank you for this overview and reminding us about 200 years of independence of Greece. And in 23, we will celebrate, or some people anyway will certainly celebrate 100 years of Atatürk's foundation of the new Turkey. Although the new Turkey of Atatürk is a bit different than what Atatürk wanted it to be. Anyway, Anna, I think Cyprus, in some way one could think that Cyprus, with all its history and the domination by the British and Italian and the Ottomans, could play the role of mediator, of bringing people together. You have the Greek population, you have a Turkish Cypriot population. It doesn't work. In the contrary, Cyprus is in the center of a crisis. How do you see the situation? Please, Anna.
Well, Hannes, I'm a historian. I'm always, once a historian, always a historian. So I will respond to that. History has the answer. And what is the answer to that? I mean, we're a small island. We're the weaker part in this equation. And whoever controls the area would control, whoever controlled the area would control Cyprus in the past. And exactly this is what we're seeing now. So, these whole struggle over natural gas, for example, in a historian's eye, this is a struggle for hegemony. It's always been like that. And, using Brzezinski's word, hegemony is as old as humankind. So no surprises there. Why this is an area where there's a lot of tension and there is a lot of conflict, because geostrategically, it's a very important hub. And unfortunately, we happen to be, at the crossroads of geography and history, where there's a lot of overlapping of tensions. Now, I'd like to take the opportunity, and I would just use something very, very important that Dimitrios has just said, and I think it's a very, very, it's an important conclusion. And Dimitrios said we have a declining of multilateralism, but at the same time, we have the rise of a multipolar world. So it's a paradox in one sense, it's an oxymoron, while at the same time, you have a failing of collective action of institutions, of countries working together. At the same time, you have the rise of a multipolar world. Now, what does that mean? I mean, Dimitrios made the case of the reluctant hegemon basically being the United States. And this, of course, has allowed the regional players to feel that they can grow stronger and they can expand the space, taking up the vacuum that the global hegemon has left there. And I think this is what we are seeing in the case of Turkey. And what is quite worrying for us, the view from Cyprus, of course, is the following. It seems that Turkey is not interested in playing along in the international system, following the rules of the game, as the rules of the game were, had been established in the past decades. And why am I saying that? I am saying that because I think there is a lack of consideration about what the international community thinks or what international law is all about. And this is an argument which I think was made very pertinently by my Turkish Cypriot compatriots in the last few days, especially because of Erdogan's visit to Cyprus and the way he approached the whole question of Famagusta. As we know, in United Nations Security Council Resolution 550, and then later on in 789, the status of Varosha, Famagusta, was established by the Security Council as a city which had to be returned to its lawful residents under the mandate of the United Nations Peacekeeping Force. And following the first resolution, the second resolution said, this would be a very good opening to a series of confidence-building measures. So Mr. Erdogan, boasting about like a neo-Ottoman sultan, holding a picnic or planning to hold a picnic because it was raining cats and dogs yesterday and he couldn't do that. And just parading and showing off the properties, the stolen properties of people, rubbing all in old wounds was something which actually sent the message to anyone who was interested to hear this. That Turkey is not really interested in any kind of, in the facade that international law would provide in this case. And this was an argument made not only by Greek Cypriots, not only by the government of the Republic of Cyprus, by the Turkish Cypriots themselves. And there were people there demonstrating, Turkish Cypriots saying, no picnic over pain, over someone's pain. And I think this is how we all felt. Especially if we bring into the picture that the place where Mr. Erdogan and his entourage passed, we know there's a mass grave of 11 Greek Cypriots, including children in that place. And, this is where he was supposed to have his party. So in terms of symbolism, the message we all got, there is no sensitivity. And again, this was an argument used by the Turkish Cypriots who were out there demonstrating yesterday that there was no sensitivity shown by Turkey being the victor in 1974, because that's reality, rubbing old on old wounds and making people feel humiliated and very upset by this whole situation. Now, of course, when you talk about delimiting maritime boundaries, let me just remind everyone, for the sake of the argument, that the Cyprus government has invited Turkey to go to the International Court of Justice in The Hague and to discuss this and set the boundaries. And of course, Turkey did not respond to this. They didn't want to hear about it. We're not interested in this. So there was, an informal proposition, let's settle this while we're negotiating for other things. And the big question that all the Greek Cypriots, would ask is this: why reinvent the wheel? If there is international law, if there are agreements that can actually settle this question of maritime boundaries in a court of law, why don't we do that? Why do we have to keep that open and just having all these kinds of violations that the EU has condemned. The United Nations Security Council has very recently, again, condemned the actions of Turkey. And we see that Turkey doesn't care. So the big problem here is that you have a free agent who is moving outside the realm of international law. So if you're the weak party, like Cyprus is the weak party, what can you do? Of course, for us, it's not just a theoretical conundrum of how to come to an agreement. For us, it's a matter of physical survival, because on top of everything else, we've had threats by Ankara, by Mr. Erdogan and his government to remember what they did to us in 1974. And, if we're not good enough, they will do it again to us if we don't, succumb to what they want. Which I think, in terms of Turkey wanting to be a member of the international community, of Turkey wanting to be even, being on the path of European accession, this is totally unacceptable. This is not how Europeans or wannabe Europeans behave in the 21st century. So for us, there's this big problem. Now, if we take it in theoretical terms of conflict resolution, going back to Galton, the founder of conflict resolution theory, he talks about negative peace. And what is negative peace is when you drag a part of the negotiation process, a member of the negotiation process, you drag them to the negotiation table, you threaten them, you blackmail them, you make them sign a peace agreement. So is this what we want in Cyprus? Because I'm afraid this is what we're getting, and this is what is getting us very skeptical about the intentions of Turkey. And on top of that, we had the threats of partition, because when we say a two-state solution, in essence, this is partition, because this is not what has been agreed under the United Nations mandate for the whole, all these decades we've been negotiating. There's been compromises being made on the negotiation table. And now Turkey says, oh, I feel very strong now. I can do whatever I like. Nobody is, I don't have any consequences for my behavior, neither by the EU or the United States. So this is a time that I will dictate to the other side that we want partition, we want two states. So as far as I'm concerned, in terms of framework, that's a negative peace process. And even if we're dragged to the negotiation table and we are forced to sign something, I don't think this peace process, this peace agreement will last. These are numbers. 50% of peace agreements anyway fail. So let alone if you had a negative peace process. And to conclude, there is something else which again worries us very much. Now, for a very long time, and maybe it was a wrong presumption on the part of Cyprus, on the part of Greece, on the part of Brussels. We thought that because Turkey was on the path of democracy and Turkey was on the path of Europeanization, we would be, we could have achieved some kind of democratic peace. Two democratic states don't go to war. So let's encourage Turkey. Let's accept Turkey into the European Union. Let's encourage the process. Democracy will increase rather than decrease in terms of all the democratic indicators in Turkey, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, again, this process has been reversed, because I don't think anybody can really argue in any convincing way that Turkey is on the path of democratic development as we speak. And I will not go into detail about that, because I think it's quite obvious what is going on now and how Mr. Erdogan and his and the elites around him have entrenched themselves in power and are planning to be there for a long time and not willing to go anywhere. And at the same time, freedom of speech and the rule of law are going downhill in Turkey. So again, asking us to be embroiled in any kind of situation where the other partner is not a democratic state is again very perplexing, and actually, let's say it's an important threat, not on a theoretical level, but actually on a very physical right to survive on this island where we've been for thousands of years. So that's my 2 cents of wisdom to start to kick off the discussion, and I'm very much interested to see what the others have to say about this.
Thank you very much, Anna. I think it was a lot of fire against Turkey, at least against Erdogan. And Mustafa Aydin, he's not the spokesman of Mr. Erdogan, but I think he has some arguments which are not supporting what you said. But anyway, it's up to him to come in with his contribution. Mustafa, please.
Thank you, Hannes. Well, I have been so many of this kind of meetings, either webinar or face-to-face, so I'm too experienced to get into the discussion who said what and what meant what, because I can easily and immediately on top of from my head, I can find maybe 2 pages of quotations which shows, or at least seems to show, the weaknesses and the problems of the Greek Cypriots or the Greeks, but that's not gonna help to understand the situation. So let me start by thanking Dimitri, who took the role of explaining a wider context for this issue. And that saves us time. And Hannes, you asked us to look into the history also in order to a little bit understand what's happening today. So I choose today to deal with how Turkey over the years, not recently, but over the years, have seen Eastern Mediterranean and Mediterranean in general. Of course, deep into the psyche and deep into the history, there is a memory of Ottoman Empire having at one time ruling over the Mediterranean. I'm not saying this just now because people are longing for it, but just to make people to understand there is this memory there, just as the memories of other countries might have from that time. Secondly, during the 20th century, and most of it actually, Turkey did not really have a policy of the Mediterranean. It did not really classify itself as a Mediterranean country. Of course, Hannes reminded us when he sent us messages that actually Mediterranean was quite important just before and during the Second World War. And that, of course, reminded me that Mediterranean was conceived as a place where a threat would come to Turkey just before and during the Second World War. It was the perceived Italian threat that pushed Turkey towards the alliance with England and France rather than the perceived German threat. And it was again perceived Italian threat in the Mediterranean from actually late 1920s, where unidentified submarines started sinking shipping in the Eastern Mediterranean and very close to Turkish shores, that kept Turkey out of the war, at least in the first year of the Second World War. It was such an important that Turkey's, in the treaty, that trilateral treaty that Turkey, France, and England signed in 1939, one of the conditions of possible Turkish entrance into the war was that if the war expand into the Mediterranean. So all other cases were disqualified unless the war expanded into the Mediterranean. Turkey would never be part of the Second World War. Anyway, eventually Turkey found other clauses not to enter the war, but that was the first instinct. During most of the 20th century, during the Cold War, in fact, Turkey and I think Greece also tried very hard to keep the Aegean Sea separate from the Mediterranean Sea. Two countries actually have not fight it, but have conflicting with each other most of the 20th century, most of the Cold War, but they try to prevent these conflicts to spill over into the Eastern Mediterranean. And I remember various texts or speeches from the Turkish Foreign Ministry saying that, you know, this Mediterranean is different from the Aegean Sea. We have several problems there with Greece. Aegean Sea is a special case. Mediterranean is different. And for Turkey, and I would argue that for most of the NATO countries, during the Cold War, Eastern Mediterranean meant Cyprus. I have several books, just my, in my back here about Cyprus. You can see here already Cyprus in Turkish, but there are others. But I have a couple of books looking into the Eastern Mediterranean security situation during the Cold War, written by non-Turks and non-Greeks, and they were talking about Cyprus, importance of Cyprus for the security of NATO. So for the NATO countries, and including Turkey, I think during most of the Cold War, when we talk about Mediterranean, we really talk about Cyprus issue and nothing else. After the end of the Cold War, Mediterranean has started to increasingly become an important issue for Turkey, and especially since the early 2000s. And there are three issues or three dimensions of this that brought Mediterranean more into the Turkish discussion. And interestingly, some sort of a Mediterranean identity, at least in foreign policy, is being forged now. Now there are articles, you can see various articles or even books being written about Turkey's Mediterranean policy, whereas you would not find any such article written before 1990s. One of the first issue of why Mediterranean has become important for Turkey, has become has risen on the agenda, is I think it's increasing geopolitical importance of the Eastern Mediterranean, especially since the Arab uprising. But even before that, but since Arab uprisings, there is very clear, very understandable and seeable rise in the importance of geopolitical importance of Eastern Mediterranean. Many countries started to pay attention. Those countries who were not really interested and who did not show much interest in the Eastern Mediterranean during the Cold War, they became much more interested in the Eastern Mediterranean and Cyprus as a whole. And Cyprus, in this sense, has been seen, it seems to be seen, as a gateway to a larger geography around the Eastern Mediterranean. It's not only Cyprus, it's not only Turkey. Now, if you put Cyprus into the middle of the compass, and you would have an access to various regions. And we have seen this here, number of countries bringing their militaries into the region. During the Cold War, the balance between United States and Soviet Union and balance between Greece and Turkey kept the region in check. But this kind of balances, as Dimitri has already highlighted, has been missing in the region in recent years also, which contributed to this changing geopolitical situation in the region. Now, several countries, not only regional countries, but United States, Russia now, for the first time in the history, France, and obviously UK because of its bases, Israel much more now than in history, Egypt, Turkey and Greece, they all, and of course the Cyprus, have military forces in this region, very in a close proximity to each other, which elevates the importance of region for Turkey. The second issue, why it becomes so important now, is of course potential of energy, and nobody should deny that and can deny that. And energy means its importance for economic and wider political reasons for Turkey. And one has to remember what happened in late 1970s in the Northern Aegean Sea. Dimitri would know this, of course, we have talked this number of times. In the late 1970s, after the Cyprus operation of Turkey, Greece and Turkey locked in counter arguments and tensions in the Northern Aegean because of the possibility of the energy resources. At the time, it was oil under the sea. And it continued despite the arguments and discussion that various people argued that there was not enough energy resources to fight over in the Northern Aegean Sea. But it went on until it was really proven there was no energy resources worth fighting in the Northern Aegean. So two countries already have this experience, and they only ended this crisis with a moratorium in the Aegean Sea because they found out that it was not enough energy resources in the region. So this is, and the same could be said in the Eastern Mediterranean. And for the Eastern Mediterranean, it is not a new problem. People are talking as if this problem emerged a year ago when Turkey started to challenging the developments in the region. In fact, Turkey has been challenging the developments in the region since the late 1990s. I found out a document when I was looking all this, that I was one of the first organizers in Turkey, bringing to academia, decision makers, and think tankers together in 1997 to discuss how to respond to the changing energy environment in the Eastern Mediterranean and how to respond to the Cypriot government, Greek Cypriot government in Turkey, of course, to its moves in the region. So already in late 1990s, this was an issue in Turkey, and Turkish Foreign Ministry had judicially, every time there was a move from the Greek Cypriot government, they also declared protestation. They sent protestation to the United Nations, to the European Union when it mattered, and to the international community when the European Union didn't matter. So there was always protestations, but it was political and it was diplomatic protests. And nobody really listened to that until, well, a couple of years back, Turkey started to sending ships, navy to the area. And until a year ago, when Turkey decided to take it even further with its ships, and not only navy ships, but also drilling ships. So it's not a new problem in the region from the energy aspect. Finally, the third issue why it became so elevated in Turkey is the strategic importance of the Eastern Mediterranean to Turkey. This is different than geopolitical changes and balances in the region. Turkey looks Eastern Mediterranean in connection with the Aegean Sea. Not everybody not everybody connects this linkage, obviously, but when you dig enough, there is a connection in Turkish, especially military mind, between Aegean Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean. They are both strategically, it is strategically unacceptable, or it's deemed strategically unacceptable in Turkey to have same country controlling both the Aegean Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean, especially if this one country is considered as not friendly enough to Turkey. So the bigger problem or double problem for Turkey is that Greek Cypriot government in Cyprus and also Greece are cooperating to control the region in a Turkish mind, to linking the region of Asia to the Mediterranean. This creates a kind of a blockage from the Turkish perspective, where Turkey could not really go into the international waters unimpeded. Of course, in peacetime, everybody would do everything, but you have to think the worst case scenarios when you are thinking international relations and for the future of the countries. So from the Turkish perspective, the worst case scenario is a possibility of conflict and war with Greece. And in that case, Turkey would not like to see control of Eastern Mediterranean by Greece or by the Greek allies of Greece. So this has been a strategic perception of, especially from the military in Turkey. And the recent creation of Eastern Mediterranean Forum or Energy Forum, Turkey sees its creation as a hostile ganging up against Turkey in the region and an attempt to block Turkey's unimpeded access to international waters. Again, these are not, obviously not all of them are my views, but I'm trying to convey what the Turkish government and also in general Turkish people are thinking. Dimitrios knows, and Ahmet also knows this very well, that I conduct public perception surveys in Turkey. And one of the, I think, biggest mistakes is being done, especially in the West, is that everything, they assume everything is being done on the whims of the president in Turkey and or small group of decision makers in Turkey. But when you do public surveys in Turkey, you would see that there is a wide majority, widespread majority on this kind of issues. And Eastern Mediterranean is one of them. Turkish establishment of Eastern Mediterranean Forum without even inviting Turkey is a very, very clear act of hostile move that needs to be opposed, blocked, and if possible, replaced. So this brings me to the question of Hannes actually put to us, whether an alternative possibility is possible in the region. I think it would be possible in the region if other actors would get involved and if Turkey would be allowed to involve from the first instance onwards, instead of being presented a fait accompli in the region. So let me stop here.
Thank you, Mustafa. So many arguments have been brought forward by different sides. So Ahmet, what is left? What is your contribution?
Yeah.
You can fill
What
some
is
holes.
left to say? Right, exactly. Well, let me first start by thanking the Center for International and European Studies, as well as the International Institute for Peace, for this kind invitation. I'm pleased to be here. I'm going to say that we had this crisis coming, approaching to us in a very slow motion. We actually saw that since the mid-2000s with the start of the bilateral agreements on the EEZ delineation. But especially after 2010, things started to speed up. We have seen this crisis approaching, and a lot of us have been actually telling this publicly. But let me start to explain this, starting from a global perspective, then zooming into the regional as well as to actually where we are. I think this coincided with the changes, global changes in the power configuration, the relative decline of the United States, the relative rise of China, and maybe less relative, but rise of Russia, which created this new situation where everybody tried to situate themselves, meaning all states tried to situate themselves in a better position in this new power configuration or new power balance. So things like the Brexit, where the UK left European Union, is also part of this equation, where we have started seeing France becoming more aggressive, more visible, trying to sort of fill the void that Brexit created. This also coincided with the rise of populist politics in the world. And Trump also enhanced this relative new power configuration in the world. When we zoom into more close to the region, the Arab Spring and the tectonic developments in the Middle East have increased this. And I think in 2013, with the Gezi movements in Turkey, I started thinking that, there are important forks in the individuals or states' lives. Which way you took changes the type of positions that you are going to take in the future. The Gezi movement was unfortunately perceived by the then Erdogan government as a big threat. So instead of, let's say, mellowing this down, Turkey chose another path domestically, becoming more and more, let's say, authoritarian. This increased this was increased with the coup attempt in Turkey. So domestically, Turkey take a, let's say, a U-turn from where it was. And of course, in foreign policy wise, we started seeing Turkey changing its foreign policy course vis-a-vis Syria and vis-a-vis the in the region. So this is how we came to this situation, and I think that the Greek Cypriot dominated Republic of Cyprus as well as Greece took another fork and sort of managed to form a bloc in front of Turkey with the cooperation with Israel, with cooperation with Egypt and the other regional countries. Of course, Turkey's foreign policy turn also helped when Turkey sort of started having sour relations with Israel and Egypt, usually following more ideological rather than more pragmatic steps, also helped this process where Turkey was sort of isolated in this region. And the last couple of years, I think Turkey started feeling this isolation, feeling this sort of left out. And that's why it started taking both diplomatic as well as more military show of force, more gunboat diplomacy in order to sort of prevent or to block this sort of fait accompli by this newly emerging bloc in front of Turkey. So the diplomatic step in Libya, or the gunboat diplomacy by sending the Navy to the region to block ENI, for example, from drilling, and finally buying its own drilling ships and sending them to the region is part of this equation. In a way, the Turkish, when we come to more towards Cyprus, you know, zooming in from all this global, regional to more micro level on the Cyprus level, I think that what Turkey is doing today with the kind of position it took, like partially opening part of the fenced area of Varosha, and supporting more openly some of the two-state solution supporters in Cyprus, is a kind of reaction, is a kind of retaliation to the Greek Cypriot stance on two areas. One, on the Cyprus negotiations, because in the perception of Turkey, it was the Greek Cypriots who refused the UN peace plan in 2004. And then more importantly, in 2017, when three guarantor powers locked their foreign ministers into a small town in Crans-Montana, Switzerland, for 10 days, it was the Greek Cypriot president who walked out from the negotiations and led to the collapse of the negotiations. So it was this frustration to that, as well as to the Greek Cypriot stance, the Republic of Cyprus government stance on not willing to negotiate with Turkish Cypriots anything related to the natural resources of the island. So this explains from the global to the more micro level. Now, what needs to be done, in my opinion, is that I still believe that Cyprus holds the key. So solving the Cyprus problem can actually play an important key role in triggering the solution of other problems in the Eastern Mediterranean, in the wider Mediterranean. So what is more practically needs to be done is we need a Crans-Montana style international conference that would bring the two Cypriot sides as well as the three guarantor powers together again. Last time in Crans-Montana, we had two negotiation tables. Table one was on the internal aspects of the Cyprus problem, and table 2 was on the future security architecture of Cyprus, United Cyprus, which included the 3 guarantor powers. I think that those 2 tables are necessary, but I think that there should be a 3rd negotiation table, maybe on an informal level, that would bring the 2 sides in Cyprus, as well as the 3 guarantor powers, especially Greece and Turkey, to the table to talk about the future delineation of maritime borders between United Cyprus and Turkey, and hopefully some sort of common understanding between Turkey and Greece for a potential delineation in the Aegean. I think that if, maybe that's a very tall order, I'm very aware of that, but I think that if we manage to do that, this can in fact trigger the solution of other outstanding problems in the Eastern Mediterranean. So the way to go is to engage people, to engage the countries, not to isolate. Now, if Turkey needs to be shown the stick, and that's usually the case in every negotiation, you use the carrot as well as the stick, you don't do it in public, especially to the Erdogan's government. Because if it is done publicly, he will retaliate with 5 times more magnitude. So everything needs to be done behind closed doors, both stick as well as genuine carrot, so that Turkey can do the compromises, as well as also gain something that can sell to the Turkish people as some sort of both political as well as economic gain. So I'll stop here, and if there are any questions, I'll be very happy to answer.
Thank you very much for all of you. And I want to remind our visitors and listeners and viewers that they can put questions, they can put forward them to you. I will take up 2 issues just mentioned also by Ahmet, and ask you to come in, all of you. The first is, of course, on the Cyprus issue. I mean, I must confess I'm biased because I have for many, many years, when in the European Parliament, talked to my friends in the Greek Cypriot side and also the Turkish Cypriot side about how Germany, for example, overcome so many conflicts and went the way of unification. I must openly say I have not the feeling that the Greek Cypriot side was interested in having a compromise, which is a real compromise. It would have been difficult, the Annan plan, to realize and implement, I must confess. And when I spoke to the presidents of Cyprus, I could agree with some of their arguments. But the fact is, the Greek Cypriot side rejected it, and the Turkish Cypriot side accepted it. And the second issue is, of course, on the energy. How can you say the energy we get out of the sea, the gas, is benefiting the Greek side, but not the Turkish part of Cyprus? I think that must lead to a reaction. That's logic. So this is my question. Maybe I'm wrong, but this is my logic. And if you say again and again, yes, in principle, we want to go join, to have a unified Cyprus, but de facto we block it, at the end, it leads to a 2-state solution, if you want or not. Not now, not in 5 years, but finally it will, unless you have the courage and the energy to do what Ahmet just said. This is my personal opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, and please react. I would, of course, confess when I'm totally wrong. And the second issue is what I don't understand on Turkish side. If Turkey, and I agree with what Mustafa said, and also it was mentioned by Ahmet, when Turkey really has an interest to have a strong role, why doesn't it overcome its issues with Israel and with Egypt? Of course, I even agree with some points and some criticism of Erdogan on the Israeli government, Netanyahu's government's dealing with the Palestinian issue. But he has no influence. He has less influence on Netanyahu and the Israeli government now. And of course, you can have, I'm friend of the, of the former president in Egypt, and Sisi is at least authoritarian. but authoritarian people can understand each other. So it's not so opposite situation. So I don't understand why Erdogan is not a bit pragmatic and trying to have an alliance with these countries if he wants really to have an influence in the area. Because the alternative is, as we saw, that Cyprus, Israel, Egypt go together. And we know that the United States is at least strongly on Israel's side. Russia is partly on Israel's side, but not always on Turkey's side, as we saw recently. So maybe these two questions, but you can, of course, take up everything else. So maybe, Anna, we ask you first to react and to come in, and then Dimitrios, and then, everybody is up to. And again, if people see some questions already coming, I will come in with these questions afterwards. Please, Anna.
Yes, let me just address first the question, the paradigm you use, the German paradigm, because I think it's the wrong historical paradigm. Now, in what sense? Now, in Germany, you had a divided country which was kept divided by the great power struggles. And when exactly did Germany get united? It got united when the Soviet Union collapsed. So basically, the aggressor, let's say, on one side, or let's say the big power pole on one side, just didn't exist anymore. And secondly, which again is very important, you had the same people. You had people speaking German, having a common history, having a common political path since the unification of Germany in 1870. So it wasn't really that difficult to get those people to live together. So let me just recap then what's going on in Cyprus. Now in Cyprus, as the United Nations Security Council resolutions recognize, the northern part of it is occupied. Now, if it's occupied, as the resolutions say, and you have a secessionist state, which is the product of occupation, occupation means an occupying army. Now, if the occupying army doesn't go away, then there is no feelings of security for the Greek Cypriots. And that is exactly why the negotiations in Crans-Montana fell through, because there was actually no agreement on the withdrawal of the Turkish wish for guarantees. So the big pole, power pole, keeping the division in place hasn't gone out of the picture as it happened in the case of Germany. And to build on this very, very briefly, I've heard in many cases talks of the Franco-German cooperation and how the European Union started through the coal and steel and so on and so forth. Again, my point would be the following. Germany, who was the aggressor, was disarmed, was harmless, had no option. They had to cooperate with the French. And of course, they had the American shepherd and the money of the Marshall Plan to fuel this whole situation, to keep going and to create an engrenage process. So if we're going back to history, the analogies of Germany and the analogies of the Franco-German cooperation cannot apply in the case of Germany, of Cyprus, because you have a totally different historical setting in place. And that's why we insist that we cannot survive on the island unified if we have Turkish guarantees in the 21st century and if we have Turkish army being present. Both in the case of the Franco-German cooperation and in the unification of Germany, the armies were gone. So now on the case of natural gas, let me just remind you that there was a convergence during the negotiations of the natural gas resources being handled by the federal government, the Talat-Christofias convergence, plus very recently, President Anastasiadis exactly to settle this issue of uncertainty on behalf of the Turkish Cypriots. He did propose to Mustafa that an escrow account is created, and when there we have profits from natural gas, if this is ever materializes, they will go into an escrow account in accordance with the convergence. So there will be no concern of anyone exploiting the other side. So this question could have been settled, but again, the Turkish Cypriots said they were not interested in this proposition. So, I mean, it's quite easy to say, oh, the Greek Cypriots did not accept the Annan Plan in 2004, or the Greek Cypriots did not accept what was going on in Crans-Montana. But I think it's quite, it doesn't help the situation if there is no effort to understand the reasons behind the insecurities that the presence of the Turkish army generates among the Greek Cypriots. And if we are being reminded all the time of what happened to us in 1974, and we haven't forgotten what happened to us in 1994, the presence of the Turkish army in Cyprus cannot in any way allow, the reunification of the island to take place.
Thank you. We'll come with another question from the colleagues, but maybe Dimitrios and Mustafa. Dimitrios?
Yeah, well, I mean, all I can say is listening to this debate, taking part in it, and always think about Greek-Turkish relations and what happens in Cyprus. And then I think about what's happening in other parts of the world, like Nagorno-Karabakh, and I say, my goodness, how lucky we are. And I think the fact that, we have learned to live without going to all-out conflict tells us a lot about what we can do. And I think potentially, I mean, Ahmet laid out a plan for Cyprus, but I think in general, potentially, the solutions are all there. They can be resolved. I mean, I'm even thinking about, the whole issue about the East Med Gas Forum. And I was listening to you, I found the Greek Prime Minister statements on October 21st, which was the last trilateral meeting between Mitsotakis, Al-Sisi, and Anastasiadis in Cyprus. And at some stage in his remarks, he goes, we must not forget, he says, the statute of the East Med Gas Forum was signed a month ago, which includes Greece, Cyprus, Egypt, Israel, Italy, Jordan, and Palestine cooperating on energy issues. I will say it again, Turkey can participate in this partnership too. It can also participate in our trilateral partnerships. It has never been excluded in principle by anyone, yet its actions bring about its marginalization. And again, we tend to look at the negatives, because out of those remarks, what was highlighted, for example, in the Greek press, in the Turkish press as well, was Mitsotakis warning Turkey not to overdo it, while in the state statement, you also have the potential of something out there. And I think this is the things we're not looking at. Just like, how do you, Ahmet said I think correctly in a way, but maybe, how he says the key lies in resolving the Cyprus issue, or maybe it's a simultaneous approach, because it's about building trust. It's about building trust. And we have a modicum of trust because we are not worried. We should be maybe, but we are not, we've shown resilience into, either Cyprus or Greece and Turkey becoming another Nagorno-Karabakh, where the track is totally lacking. And I think we need to have this realization that the windows of opportunities are closing, be it in Cyprus, even though Cyprus is interesting because, there's a counter argument. Right now, there's a lot of talk about a two-state solution, but an argument is that, well, maybe it's not a valid two-state solution, is just there as a negotiating ploy, because it would mean that if this were to occur, Turkey loses basically all its leverage within the EU as well. I mean, which would have had more leverage with finding a solution for a united Cyprus, whether it's a federation or confederation or whatever, right? Some say. So we'll see. But I mean, what we are seeing is that the parameters of our solutions are there. So whether it is Cyprus first and putting an effort there, and now conceivably one can, that since in the north there's a new president, that you had elections, or it's something which is, the positive package between the EU and Turkey, the positive agenda, starting exploratory talk between Greece and Turkey that can move to an agenda or at least an agreement that on certain issues we need to negotiate at The Hague, which means take the politics out of it, the political pressure out of the leaders, and allow for some sort of compromise that the courts will find. And simultaneously, this can resolve issues on a number of fronts, because it's not just Cyprus or what Greece and Turkey could take to The Hague. It's also the issue of the extension of territorial waters, which, as I said, it's Greece's sovereign right in the Aegean. But under what conditions will it do it so that it does not raise tensions? It's also a question of how we educate our publics. The fact that the Greek Prime Minister, and I keep saying this, says all the time now, it's been a Greek position, but he says every time that, we go to The Hague, is in itself a willingness to compromise. It's in itself a willingness to compromise. Or that there are a number of analysts such as myself, and when we get on Greek media, or we write, we say that Greece has the right to extend its territorial waters up to 12 nautical miles. Just by saying up to, we are trying to educate the public. It's not 12 nautical miles, which is what everybody thinks. It's up to 12, and there are ways around it. And I think, so we can have the parameters of doing this, but somehow we are caught in our own discourses, or the tit for tat game. Well, if your ships withdraw first, then I withdraw my ships. Then we sit down to negotiate, and there is what Ahmet, and I totally agree with Ahmet, how a lot of this has become so public. This public diplomacy, this public arena, this damn Twitter, which is destroying. I mean, it's incredible. We talk about Trump, but every government is doing this right now, not in a Trumpian way. But I mean, the spokespersons, the ministers, and everybody are just using this medium out there just to send out their message, which most of the time I don't think is constructive. While, they were smart enough people, I think our leaders are smart enough, all their advisors and all of us are smart enough, we know the issues, to find the roots of the solution. And of course, not to focus so much on history, because we keep focusing. We need to know our history. No one says we should forget our history. We should all know where we come from. But we need to look to the present and the future, and that's what we're not doing. And so I am not saying this from a position of an idealist. Mustafa will accuse me I'm always too optimistic. Fine. But because I would like to think that there's a future out there, and I see that we have the parameters around. And this is what and it's interesting too, last point, in all our assessment, we all talk about the systemic change. This is already a basis. Let's take that, how we see the systemic change and it's affecting from multilateralism to multipolarity. All of us spoke about this. Listen to each other and then build from there. I'll stop here.
Thank you. We need some optimistic people at least. Mustafa, and then I
Yes.
will put the question to you from the audience and start with Ahmed.
Thank you. Yes, I'll keep it short because I see several questions are coming from
Yes.
the audience, so I'll keep very short. And thank you, Dimitri. Of course, I always appreciate his optimism. It allows me to be pessimist. Otherwise, it will be only one-sided. So we balance each other here. But I agree almost everything is being said. I also do believe that priority here is to talk and get people to engage in dialogue. And there are various ways of doing that, of course, with or without involvement of international community. When I was listening, Ahmed, I was writing down, if I remember correctly, Turkish position. Turkey has suggested 3 different meetings in recent months. One is about Cyprus. This is this 5-way meeting for Cyprus to explore where we are in Cyprus. And that comes from, Dimitri and I went to Ankara and talked to different people and decision makers for a project. And when we are doing that, I also keep asking different questions and trying to see how foreign policy is currently being made in Turkey and what are the priorities. And when we talked about the Cyprus issue, why Turkey seems to changing at the time its position. Now we know that Turkey has changed its position as of yesterday, but about a month ago it was changing. And one of the explanation that keep coming from different people was, and at least that how I understand, there was a very deep and deepening distrust and frustration with the Greek Cypriot position over the years. As Ahmed mentioned, Annan Plan and Crans-Montana, these two have left quite an impression, especially because the same people in Turkey involved in both cases, and same people who involved in both cases who promoted for solution against those hardliner in the country get burned at the end, because they always, at the end of the both Annan Plan and the Crans-Montana, the liberal people who wanted to solve these issues always get told that, yeah, we told you so. They would agree. Why are you compromising? I think something very similar is happening and happened in Greece. please don't underestimate the election of new President Tatar in northern Cyprus. And I know that there are arguments, and part of it is true. Turkey tried heavily to influence the result of the elections in northern Cyprus, but this is not the first time. Remember, last two presidents were very pro-solution, very liberal pro-solution in Cyprus. But it seems that the people in the Turkish Cypriot part of the island have now totally frustrated, and they went this time for a hardliner who is now defining or who's now arguing for two-state solution instead of bizonal, bicommunal federation. So maybe one of the ways, let's start talking. If it's five-way meeting for Cyprus, okay, let's try that first, and then try to move two-way negotiations again. The second meeting, I think, was offered from Turkey, and I don't see any takers of that idea, but nevertheless, it's on the table, is a multilateral meeting for Eastern Mediterranean to explore the energy issues. I think the European Union High Commissioner briefly took up this idea also. Maybe there is a life there for this idea. If so, it will be good. And the third one is an idea talking Eastern Mediterranean or including Eastern Mediterranean into the Turkish-Greek exploratory talks. Of course, the problem with the exploratory talks that they have not started yet. Even though the prime ministers and the president and the foreign ministers have agreed to start them, they have not yet started. But eventually they will. And that's, I agree with here, the good thing about this proximity or exploratory talks between Greece and Turkey was and has been that they were secret, not public talks. Okay, it's very easy to criticize, and I have done a number of times, meeting 60+ times and not solving the issues. It's easily criticized, and I have done that number of times. But the fact that two sides are talking has always been important. I think it's more important today than anything. So I think the priority should be today is to bring back Greece and Turkey for this non-public talks and discussions, which might lead to talks in the Eastern Mediterranean and new talks in Cyprus. Finally, the question that actually posed by Hannes, and I totally agree with him, why Turkey does not overcome its problems with Israel and Egypt. I keep asking that publicly in Turkey, and I keep arguing importance of that in Turkey, so I don't need to do it here. And the reason why it's not happening, I have no answer. I'm sorry. I follow very much in Turkish politics, but when it comes to this, it comes to a level that there is we cannot go beyond and understand the response to this question. And I will keep asking this question also in Turkey.
Thank you very much. I think we should come to a final round, and I would ask you perhaps to take up some of the questions in this final round. There was, first of all, a question about Joe Biden, and there's also a question about Russia. What would it change? Maybe Ahmed, you can also deal with that. Yeah. Then also the question of Turkey in the South Caucasus. Mustafa, Ahmed, you can, or Dimitrios. And then specifically to Anna, maybe there was the question about the Belarus, the sanction issue when Cyprus vetoed the Belarus sanctions and combined that with the Turkish sanctions. And maybe an interesting question, would political equality instead of military presence be a way out? To say Turkish and Greek Cypriot side have the same rights and the same position, then the military would leave. Which would be very difficult, but anyway, this was the question. Maybe you can come into this a bit to give our listeners and viewers also the feeling that their questions have been taken up. But maybe Ahmed, you can start also. Yeah. Take up some of this question and react.
Yes. Just to start with, I agree with your evaluation, Hannes, regarding Cyprus. I think the two important issues in Cyprus the key issues. One is the political equality and sharing power. And the other one is what Anna sort of implied, which is the security issue. The UN Secretary General Kofi Annan very openly said after the referendum in 2004 that the real problem is whether, you know, the two sides, especially Greek Cypriot side, is ready to share power with Turkish Cypriots, or whether the Turkish Cypriots were seen as a kind of partner or as a minority. Because as you know, the Cyprus problem didn't start in '74. I mean, the UN peacekeeping force has been in Cyprus since 1964. And the Turkish Cypriot partner of the Republic has been absent from that supposedly bi-communal partnership republic. In any case, so I think that power sharing is very important. I still do believe that there is a chance, maybe a last chance, maybe a final chance to try this, because if we can try this and we are successful in solving the Cyprus problem, as I said, it can trigger other problems, solving the other problems. Now, something that Mustafa mentioned, if you look at the last 20 years of the elections in Cyprus, the presidential elections in the northern Cyprus, start with 2000, it was Mr. Denktaş, 2005, Talat, 2010, Mr. Eroğlu, 2015, Mr. Akıncı, and 2020, Tatar. Right, left, right, left, right. So to me, that's the pendulum swinging from one side to the other. I remember when Mr. Eroğlu was elected after Talat, I said that this was a message by the Greeks, by the Turkish Cypriots to both Greek Cypriots as well as the international community, including EU and the UN. And it is this: look, guys, we give you 5 years. This pro-solution guy, you work with him. You don't like him? Try this one. And then come back 5 years later, we'll give you another pro-solution. If you are not ready, then I think that there is this kind of pendulum swinging from one to the other side. But anyway, food for thought. Now, Biden. As I said before we start this discussion today, starting the last couple of weeks, I say that I started having at least a glimmer of hope in this interesting times that the whole world is passing through. One is the election of Biden after Trump, and the other one is maybe the possibility of a good resulted vaccines. Now, joke aside, I think that Biden will need to repair some of the damage, both domestically as well as internationally, that Trump administration has done on institutions, both domestically, as I said, and internationally. Biden will turn his face to the other side of the transatlantic and will try to patch up the relations with the European allies. So maybe it is too early, but I believe that Biden administration will be more visible together with the European allies in this region, both in Eastern Mediterranean as well as in the Middle East. Remember, during EMEA Kardak crisis, we had United States sort of doing the fight. It was Richard Holbrooke who came to prevent the two countries from the brink of a war. What happened a couple of months ago when Turkey and Greece had a tension in the Eastern Mediterranean? Where was United States? So I don't think that would be the case under Biden's administration. And Biden is, interestingly, somebody who actually visited Cyprus when he was the vice president after Lyndon Johnson so many years later. So he's not a stranger to the Cyprus problem. He actually met with the two leaders and he actually proposed some confidence building measures. So during his administration, I think the state, the Secretary of State, whoever he is going to appoint, will be more visible and will be more engaged with the parties in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna, please.
Just to pick up on what Ahmet just mentioned on the involvement of the Americans, I mean, Jeffrey Pyatt, for example, the American ambassador in Athens, was bragging, and I was there when he did it at the Economist Conference in Greece like 2 months ago, that his boss, Mike Pompeo, had scored a diplomatic victory when the Oruç race went back in, you know, in Turkish harbor, and you know, tensions calmed down. At the same time, the German press was saying exactly the same, that it was a diplomatic victory for Angela Merkel. And then a few days later, the Oruç race was back out again. So I'm not so sure if it's the absence of diplomacy which is causing this mayhem in the area. I think it's the absence of incentives on the part of Turkey to comply, let's say, with what its allies are asking it to do or are suggesting. So, and just to, you know, because we've talked about public diplomacy and secret diplomacy, I mean, I'm quite puzzled why we've been saying that there hasn't been any secret diplomacy, because only like a couple of months ago, Mr. Çavuşoğlu came out and said, oh, we've been having secret talks with the Greek government in Berlin. And you know, it caused, I mean, it wreaked havoc in Greece. Mitsotakis was quite in a lot of trouble. So, you know, talking about demolishing trust between two sides, why, when you're talking, you know, secretly, and this is what governments do. I mean, we all know that. And this is, you know, how serious diplomacy is conducted, is behind closed doors. And I do agree with everybody who was mentioned before, you know, this public confrontation doesn't really help anyone. So I think we really need to call a spade when we're analyzing things, so we can be more realistic as to what to expect. And now, you know, trying to close now on a positive note, because I don't want Dimitrios to be the only optimist on this panel. I think it's very important to emphasize 2 points already been made by the other panelists. First of all, the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum is really an opportunity for regional cooperation. And I think it's very important to stress that Prime Minister Mitsotakis and President Anastasiadis and the foreign ministers repeatedly have invited Turkey and other members, let's say other partners in the area, to join forces with them in the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum. I think that's very important. Now, secondly, the other important proposition, of course, let's go to the International Court of Justice in The Hague. Why not? I mean, if there have been tensions all along and we can't agree, both, you know, Cyprus with Turkey and Turkey with Greece, why don't we go to the International Court of Justice? I mean, the Cyprus government has suggested this, the Greek government has suggested this, and I think, you know, it's a way forward of allowing mediation to take place under the auspices of international law, and then abide, you know, by the decision. And then, of course, you know, that's a great confidence building measure, because then the leaders can say to their domestic audiences, guys, you know, you want, you know, 10 and we got 5 each, which is how compromises, you know, happen in international settings, and it's all under international law. So no disagreements there. It's a great confidence building measure. So I'll end on this positive suggestions.
Okay, Mustafa.
My question was out of the region, moving to the South Caucasus. But in fact, of course, I can even argue to link South Caucasus to the Mediterranean easily, but I'm not going to do it because it will even more confuse the region. So looking to the South Caucasus, well, after so many years, some sort of a militarily enforced solution is coming to the Caucasus. Whether it's going to be durable or not, it will depend on various developments, and especially what will happen within Armenia, and how political situation within Armenia will pan out. It will determine whether the current stage will continue. And let us not forget what was agreed was also a ceasefire agreement. So it's not a peace yet. So it's a ceasefire agreement, and actually it's a phased ceasefire agreement, and first deadline is already missed. There was a deadline by I think 15th for Armenia to evacuate some part of the territories that it was occupying beyond the Nagorno-Karabakh, and it failed, and Russia asked Azerbaijan to allow another 10 days. So we are already in the problematic aspect of the ceasefire agreement. Turkey is not, of course, in the announced agreement ceasefire deal, Turkish forces are not mentioned to be part of a ceasefire, a peacekeeping operation, and they are not to be. However, it seems that there is some sort of an agreement not fully announced between Turkey and Azerbaijan and between Turkey and Russia, that some sort of a Turkish forces will be based in Azerbaijani territory to monitor whatever they are going to monitor, but they are not going to be in the Nagorno-Karabakh territory. There is, of course, a very hotly disputed discussion, heated discussion internationally about who gained what in the recent flare-up of the issue in the Caucasus, and it seems that everybody agrees that Russia has been one of the biggest beneficiaries, apart from Azerbaijan, of course, regaining its territories. Russia has managed a very difficult, very unmanageable situation very easily and successfully, and has finally obtained permission of Azerbaijan to send Russian peacekeeping forces into the Azerbaijani territories, which it was trying to do since 1994 and have failed so many times. So now Russia has an influence, heightened influence in Azerbaijan and have heightened influence in the Caucasus. Azerbaijan, having liberated its territories, of course, is another real and big winner here. Turkey, by that kind of a counting of the beans, seems not to be that much bigger winner. However, I would add here that Turkey has been kind of absent from the Caucasian forefront for some years. Of course, Turkish, Azerbaijani, and Georgian relations have been developing quite successfully, and this trilateral cooperation are there. But apart from that, Turkey has been kind of put Caucasus into the back burner because of the pressing issues in the Middle East, in the south. And now with this moves, in its recent moves, and with this recent agreement, it seems that we are going to see more Turkey in the Caucasus, maybe involving more of the Caucasian issues, and maybe involving more of the solutions for some long-term issues. One aspect that I should mention, not gets attention very much, the reason why Turkey closed its border with Armenia in 1993 was the occupation of Kelbecer region of Azerbaijan, which was very far away from the front line of the time. And now the Kelbecer is the first region that Armenia is supposed to evacuate. If that happens, that removes the official Turkish reason closing the border, the first instance. Secondly, when Turkey and Armenia come up with two protocols to reinvigorating their relationship and creating a rapprochement back in 1999, back in 2009, the problem, it failed. And when it failed, Erdogan, who was prime minister at the time, said that Turkey would not normalize its relations with Armenia until the occupation of Karabakh ends. So now it's ending. Maybe this might give a boost, an opportunity to re-engage look into the Turkish-Armenian relations. I'm not so naive to think that it will happen now, because especially the feelings and sentiments is very high in Armenia currently against Azerbaijan and Turkey. But maybe after a couple of years, now we might have a real chance of going back to that kind of a discussion. Thank you.
And maybe, Mustafa, if the Greek Cypriot government asks Turkey to take the troops from Cyprus and then to Azerbaijan, you can even solve the Cyprus issue.
Well, I mean, let me mention, since you provoked me here, let me remind everybody, it was in the Annan plan, there was an evacuation program for Turkish military from the island. Thank you.
Well, I think some 100 should have stayed there. Was the
100 is nothing.
But anyway, if you see how close,
30,000, you know.
how close the Turkish border is, the military could come anytime. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
Another issue. Dimitrios, we have to round up. We need an optimist to round up and to show us into the good future.
Well, I'm not sure whether what I'm going to say is optimistic right now. Anna did her part. No, two things very quickly, even just looking at the questions. The one by Maria Zacharaki and the Biden factor. I think that other than, you know, more institutional relationships and relations coming up between the US and all countries of the world, one has to consider one thing. And I think what's coming out of the Biden campaign and its people, and I think it's going to come out of the Biden administration, is for the US and the West not to lose Turkey. And if it's about keeping Turkey in the West, I think this is something both Athens and Nicosia have to consider in the calculations. What does it mean? If this is the priority, how do we work with this? Because it doesn't have to be negative necessarily, but we have to consider this factor. And I think many of Biden's persons that have had experience in the past, and many of his people, and would probably get administration positions, will try to do this, at least at first, to try to keep Turkey in the West. So we have to consider that. The second thing I want to, I mean, this is one of the questions, in part of it by Stephanie Fenkart, which had to do with, you know, the whole sanctions thing, Cyprus and Belarus. I mean, it's easy to accuse Cyprus, which is a very small country in the EU, of compartmentalization of its foreign policy. Cyprus has possibilities as to look at an immediate neighborhood, right? First of all, it sees that its own territory, its own sovereignty is divided, and there's an issue there in terms of governance and final solution. And it also sees that, you know, it sees a big Turkey, and it sees its partners in the Middle East, and then it sees Greece. And so this is its focus. Many of the countries of Central and Eastern Europe that are accusing Cyprus of this are doing exactly the same. They're doing exactly the same, of just focusing on the Belarus issue or the Russia threat. So whether it's the Baltics or the Czech Republic or the Slovak Republic. So this is a reality that the EU itself, the big guys within the EU, better step up. The Germany and the France and the others, and try to work towards having a more cohesive EU foreign policy. Otherwise, these things will keep emerging. So accusing one side of trying to block the other, which is exactly the reverse argument that the other side is trying to do anyway, is not really helping the EU to step up as an actor that has the wherewithal, the tools, the ideology, the philosophy, an actor that won the Nobel Peace Prize for this in 2012, to do its share as a security guarantor with the instruments it has at its disposal. And so this is something we need to consider, because otherwise it ends up being a blame game, and it should not be that. But the reality is the EU is made up of small and very small states. And the problem with the small and very small states is that many times in their analysis, they cannot see the wider picture, because they have to deal with the reality of the immediate threat that's out there. Even a country that's a medium state within the EU, Greece, it's a small state in the international arena. It's a medium-sized state, number 10th, I think, in population. And an old member state that should know, it's caught up by this without trying to do a larger systemic analysis of what's happening. Because here we talked about Turkey in the Eastern Mediterranean. We just talked about, because there were questions, and Mustafa tried to explain what's happening in Nagorno-Karabakh. There could have been a question about Turkey in Syria and Iraq and so on. We have to understand that larger context and how it affects us, as opposed to the argument, which is, it's very real that Turkey is seen as a threat because it's it's finding itself on the territories of other states, violating the sovereignty, and therefore the perception, and it's using its power, its muscle, absolutely. But we have to put that in a larger context to try to come up with solutions that somehow bring about a security community. And before I give the floor to you, Hannes, I'd like to thank you again for this partnership. And it's the first time we actually work together on this, and we should think of doing this more often. I was also gratified. At some stage, we had over 100 people, whether it was both on Zoom and Facebook, watching simultaneously. And thank you very much. Floor is yours, Hannes, and to all the speakers.
Dimitrios, thank you, everybody, Anna, Mustafa, Ahmet, because I think that was a very interesting discussion. Of course, we didn't solve the issues, but at least we got from Ahmet and all the others, so some hints, some signs where the issue could go to. I think it is, as Ahmet said, more or less the last chance to come to a solution. But with all the problems and all the interest of the different partners, it is, I would say, it's mature to come to a solution, because you can solve the energy issue and the Cyprus issue and the bigger role for Turkey in the region, but a role which is compatible with a peace structure all at once. But you need statesmen who think wider than just for their own nation, as Dimitrios said. Anyway, I don't want to restart the discussion.
Maybe, Hannes, let me just say something. Maybe you need stateswomen, huh?
Stateswomen,
not only statesmen.
Even more. But it's so even in countries in Europe, it's in European Union, it's very rare. And I look forward to the next, to the first stateswoman in Ankara, which is not easy to see. But anyway, why not? We
had the first one, but
the prime minister. You have a prime minister. If she was so successful is another issue we can doubt about. Anyway, yes, stateswomen, statesmen, whatever. We need people who look more into the future and not to the immediate future. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for joining.
Thank you too. Thank you.
Thank you all the participants. As was said, there were quite a lot. So you see, it's a big issue and it's a big interest here. Thank you and have a nice evening. Bye-bye.